on the note of developing your book and coming up with these ideas of how technology ethics are treated, not just in the West, but all around the world, something that you've brought up a number of times is the idea of whether we should have something like the Hippocratic Oath that they have in medicine for technology.
Mm.
And so it doesn't seem like that's I don't know. It doesn't seem like it's probably a practical thing that we're going to have like an international technology Hippocratic Oath come about. It's a nice idea,
Mm.
but so maybe instead of a symbolic oath, are there practical non-negotiable checkpoints that maybe should be embedded into tech product development life cycles or yeah, so some kind of tool set like a Swiss Army knife
Mm.
that technologists could work with that maybe is enforced in some way and isn't considered to be a luxury.
I think that you've hit on the rub of it, which is the enforcement question. The reason I liked the Hippocratic Oath, by the way, is not because it's like a mandatory thing. Like not even all medical schools around the world require that now, and it hasn't always been required for doctors. And it was actually recreated or sort of rebooted, if you will, after the Second World War, because of course, as we all know, the Nuremberg trials. After the Second World War, there was a special doctors' trial because doctors were actually very instrumental in the Nazi regime's murder of many citizens of several European countries. And they had a special trial for that. And so that led to a sort of reckoning and a crisis within the medical community after the war, which was like, how is it that a bunch of people who are supposedly trained to help keep people alive and indeed healthy and thriving, how on earth were they among the first instruments of murder in a tyrannical regime? And I was really fascinated by that because my second area of study was history and specifically World War II history. So I was like, Jesus. And they revisited the training of doctors because of what happened in World War II, right? Like that reboot came as a response to an acknowledged, universally discussed around the world problem of horror. And I was fascinated by that because of the way that we think about trust. Doctors tend to be quite trusted, put a stethoscope and a white coat on them and you're like, oh, you'll do what they say. It's very difficult for a lot of people to push back against a doctor. They have more training than us, etc. And often when you approach a doctor, it's because you're unwell, you're injured, you're sick, or your family member is. So you need to know you can trust them. So I was thinking about those sorts of concepts, the historical reality of trusted, intelligent people betraying that trust in the worst possible way that they possibly could. How do you then come back from that? How do you restore trust to a profession? Why do some medical schools do something like a Hippocratic Oath and some don't? The fact, by the way, that the original Hippocratic Oath versus what's said today is largely rewritten. So what was
They don't do it in Greek?
no, a lot of them have rewritten it, and that I kind of like that. It's basically just the first one is first do no harm, which I think is totally appropriate for technologists to embrace as well. And then second, which is the mission statement in my book, is like, how do I maximize the benefits and minimize the harms, which I personally think is a bit more realistic for utilitarian way of thinking about it, which is there's going to be some harm. You cannot make the omelet without breaking some eggs. So fine, choose it. Choose it mindfully, build it in, have a discussion. It could be democratic. We should all be thinking about this. That implies that people have to be around the table. There's knowledge, there's consent, blah, 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 all this stuff. So that was the only reason I was thinking about it. And the reason I liked it for the medical establishment and thought it might be useful for technologists is precisely because it isn't enforceable. It's not about like getting a driver's license. Like you are not allowed to drive your car unless you have a driver's license and insurance. And if you don't have those things, you could get arrested, sued, etc. This is more like this is part of joining this community. It's an ethos. And it's a sign, I would hope, in the best engineering schools, the best business schools, etc., that we teach ethics. And indeed, that is actually true in lots of professions. So lawyers have this, accountants have this, civil servants have it. Here in the UK, the civil service ethics code is really serious. I have several friends who are civil servants here, and I really admire them. Their sense of commitment to something larger than themselves is part of their professional training. So I think it would be lovely, this is just my own take on it, for technologists to have that in their formation and for them to think about it a lot. If we treated our careers as a vocation, why do you get out of bed in the morning? What are you building? That would be something that I think could help, not just with how we design and live and create, but also for our relationship with everybody else, the users of our products, our customers, but who are also our family, our friends, etc. So it's just an articulation of a value statement, but I don't think we need to add more regulation to it, in the sense of, you can't code unless you've done this thing, or you can't create something unless you've got the world does not need that. But nothing, you don't have to be regulated to do the right thing. You could just decide to, not be an asshole.
Yeah, it's kind of this idea, even when you said, the first line, I guess, of a typical Hippocratic Oath of the first do no harm, it's interesting how with technology, often the primary incentive is first make a profit. It's like, or first generate ARR.
Well, is it though? Like, I would say that's for like companies. That's for a lot of people, sure, but like a lot of people are out just tinkering, right? Or like necessity is the mother of all invention. The person who invented the washing machine, or what? I'm just looking around. It's, now I'm like everything in my house suddenly looks like a
Toilet.
technology and a tool. Yeah, you're usually doing it to solve a problem, right? Where you're like, God damn, I cannot take this anymore. I want scissors for left-handed people. Instead, I know the world is mainly right-handed, but there's a whole crew of people who are not being served and they can't scissor things without hurting their hands. I shall invent it, right? I think it's often, hopefully, coming from that. Yes, there are people who always start with the profit motive first, good for them. But I think a lot of innovators are more, they're problem solvers. And then they're like, oh man, if I did this, I can make bank. Why not? There's nothing wrong with that. But I think the best stuff comes from solving problems.